She was standing in my kitchen at 7 in the morning, wearing an oversized flannel shirt that wasn't hers, making coffee in a pot she had brought from her own apartment 3 weeks earlier and never taken back. She turned around when she heard me walk in, and she smiled, not a big smile, just the small, quiet kind that people make when they are exactly where they are supposed to be. And I thought, how did it take me 11 years to end up here? It started with a voicemail. My name is Adrian Cole. I am 39 years old. I work as a civil engineer for a mid-size infrastructure firm in Denver, Colorado. I design drainage systems and retaining walls and the kind of structural work that keeps roads from sliding down hillsides during heavy rain. Nobody asks me about it at parties. When I tell people what I do, they nod and change the subject, which is fine by me. I am not someone who needs to be the most interesting person in the room. I had been living alone in a 2-bedroom house in the Wash Park neighborhood for about 18 months, by the time the voicemail arrived. The second bedroom had a desk in it and a box of books I had never unpacked. I had been meaning to deal with it since I moved in. I never did. The marriage ended not with a fight, but with a conversation. My ex-wife, Gwen, sat across from me at the dining table one evening in March and told me in a voice that was more exhausted than angry that she did not think I was capable of needing anyone, that I had built a life so self-contained that she had started to feel like an optional feature rather than a person. She was not wrong, exactly. She was describing something real. I just did not know how to argue with it in a way that would have mattered, so I did not try. After the divorce, my days became very organized. I woke up at 5:45. I made coffee, drank it standing at the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood come awake, then drove to the office. I worked dinner. I came home. Usually something simple, eggs or pasta or whatever was in the fridge, and I read until 10 and went to sleep. On weekends I ran the park loop, went to the hardware store for things I did not urgently need, and sometimes drove up into the mountains alone just to be somewhere big and quiet for a few hours. I did not think of myself as lonely. I had gotten comfortable inside my own routine the way you get comfortable in an old jacket. You stop noticing how worn it is. Lena Shaw was a structural photographer, the kind who shoots buildings and bridges and construction for architecture firms, engineering publications, and the occasional museum exhibit. I had met her through Gwen, actually. Gwen and Lena had gone to the same college, stayed loosely in touch the way old friends do when geography and different lives pull them in different directions. Lena lived in Portland. She came through Denver maybe once a year to visit family and would sometimes have dinner with us, the three of us at some restaurant Gwen picked. Conversation moving around the table without landing anywhere in particular. What I remembered about Lena was this. She always had her camera bag with her. Even at dinner. Not the big professional one, a smaller one, worn canvas with a buckle closure that she set on the chair next to her like it was a guest, and she noticed things. She would pause mid-sentence to look at the way light was hitting the wall behind your head, then come back to the conversation without making it strange. After Gwen and I split, Lena disappeared from my life the way Gwen's whole world did. No falling out, no conversation about it. Just the natural closing of a door. I assumed she sided with Gwen, or at least that it would have been awkward not to, and I did not blame her for that. That was 2 years before the voicemail. I was in the middle of a site review on a Wednesday afternoon when my phone buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. That evening, driving home, I listened to it on the car speakers. Her voice was calm, with a careful quality to it, like someone choosing words a little more slowly than they normally would. Hey Adrian, this is Lena Shaw. I know this is out of nowhere and I completely understand if it's weird. I'm actually relocating to Denver. New contract with an engineering firm that wants in-house documentation photography, which is kind of a dream gig for me. I'm supposed to be there in about 3 weeks, and I don't know anyone in the city anymore. I remembered you're in Denver. I was wondering if you'd be willing to help me scout some neighborhoods, maybe look at a few apartments. No pressure at all. Just thought I'd ask. I sat in the driveway for a moment after it ended. Helping your ex-wife's college friend find an apartment in Denver. It was the kind of thing that sounded almost normal until you said it out loud, but there was nothing in her voice that felt like a setup. She sounded like exactly what she said she was. Someone new to a city who did not know anyone. I called her back the next morning. I said yes. She arrived on a Saturday in late September. I met her at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood she had said she liked from photos online. She walked in with the canvas camera bag on her shoulder and a second-hand duffel that looked like it had been across 3 continents, and she looked exactly the same as I remembered her, except that her hair was shorter and there was something different in the way she held herself. More settled, like someone who had stopped waiting for a different version of their life to start. We spent most of that day walking. I showed her Capitol Hill, parts of the Highlands, a stretch of Platt Street along the river. She took photographs the whole time. Not staged ones, just quick, quiet ones. She almost seemed to take, by reflex, the camera coming up and going back down before you realized she had used it. She did not narrate what she was shooting or explain why she was interested in it. She just looked at things, and when something held her attention, she captured it. I found her an apartment in the Highlands neighborhood, third floor of a brick building from the 1940s, south-facing windows, decent light. The kind of place that needed a few things fixed. A sticky deadbolt, a bathroom faucet that ran slow, but the bones were good. She signed the lease 2 days later. I came by to help her move in on a Friday. She owned very little for someone in her late 30s, a camera system, which she packed and moved herself with the kind of care most people reserve for living things. A decent amount of clothing, a small collection of architecture and photography books that she stacked in the corner until she had a shelf. A wooden drafting table, old, the surface worn smooth from years of use, that we had to disassemble to get through the door and reassemble inside the living room. It took 40 minutes and a set of hex keys and some creative language. When we were done, she made pour-over coffee in the kitchen. She had the equipment for it in a small cloth pouch she clearly traveled with. And we sat on the floor against the wall because she had not bought furniture yet, and we talked. We talked for 3 hours, not about Gwen, not about the divorce, not about any of the history between us. We talked about Denver and what neighborhoods were worth knowing, about the engineering firm she was starting with, about a documentary she had just watched on the interstate highway system that she could not stop thinking about. She asked me what the most interesting project I had ever worked on was, and I told her about a retaining wall project in the foothills, where we had to reroute a seasonal stream, and she listened like it was actually interesting. Not politely. Actually. I drove home that night thinking about a specific moment from the afternoon. I had been reassembling the drafting table and I could not quite get one of the bracket bolts to catch at the right angle, and Lena had crouched down next to me, looked at the problem for about 4 seconds, then said, "Try rotating the bracket a quarter turn counterclockwise before you thread it." She was right. It worked immediately. I looked at her and she shrugged. "I've watched a lot of people build things," she said. And then she went back to the kitchen to check the coffee. It was such a small thing, but it stayed with me on the drive home in a way I could not entirely explain. Over the next several weeks, I found reasons to be useful. There was always something. Her bathroom faucet needed a new aerator. $5 fix, 10 minutes of work. She mentioned that one of her window tracks was painted shut, and she could not open it all the way. I came by on a Tuesday evening after work with a utility knife and a heat gun, and had it open in 20 minutes. She made dinner while I worked, something with pasta and a tomato sauce she clearly made from scratch, because the kitchen smelled like it had been cooking for an hour before I arrived. We ate at the drafting table because she still did not have a proper dining table, and the conversation went until 10 o'clock without either of us noticing. I started noticing smaller things after that. Things I had no business knowing but that she apparently knew about me. She always had black coffee ready when I came by. Not because she asked, just because she knew. She knew I preferred working in silence to working with music on. One afternoon, I came by to fix the closet door track that had jumped off its runner, and she had already laid out a small tray with the tools she thought I would need, in the right order, including a rubber mallet that I had not told her I preferred for this kind of repair. I asked her how she knew about the mallet. She looked at the tray for a moment and said, "I've seen you work before." I thought she meant recently. I did not press it. Here is what I did not think about, and probably should have. Lena had been in our home. During those annual dinners, those occasional weekend visits when she came through Denver, she had been in my house, watched me fix a door hinge that was pulling out of the frame one Thanksgiving, watched me re-level a kitchen shelf that had been slightly off since we moved in. She had been paying attention, not to the house, to me. I did not understand that yet. About 6 weeks after the move, I was at my desk on a Thursday evening when my phone lit up with a name I had not seen in over a year, Gwen. I did not answer immediately. I sat with it for 2 rings, then picked up. Her voice had an edge I recognized immediately, the controlled kind, where the sharpness is disciplined rather than loose. "I heard you've been spending a lot of time with Lena," she said. No greeting. Straight to it. I told her what was true, that I had helped Lena find an apartment, that I had been over a few times to help her get settled. That was all. Gwen was quiet for a beat. Then she said something that was designed to land and stay. She told me that back when we were married, she had come home unexpectedly one afternoon and found a text conversation on her laptop. She and Lena shared an account for some streaming service, and Lena had been logged in, and that the texts had made her wonder about things she had never said out loud. She said she was not accusing anyone of anything. She just wanted me to know what kind of person Lena was. I asked her what the text said. She would not tell me exactly. She described them vaguely. Lena asking questions about my habits, my schedule, the things I was building or fixing around the house. Gwen called it oddly specific. She delivered this information the way someone delivers a gift wrapped in concern. Carefully, with both hands, making sure you felt the weight of it. I knew Gwen. 4 years of marriage teaches you how a person operates under pressure. She was not calling to warn me. She was calling because if Lena and I found something in each other, if the quiet she had called emotional unavailability turned out to be exactly what someone else had been looking for years, that would mean the story she had written about why she left was missing something. Gwen could not afford that. I told her I appreciated her saying something. I said goodnight. I hung up. And then, because I am human and not made of stone, it worked. A little, just enough to change the temperature of things. The next time I went to Lena's apartment, I was half a step different. I stayed on the other side of the room more than I needed to. I finished the shelf adjustment she had asked about and said I had an early morning and left before we had gotten to the part of the evening that had started to feel like the point of the evening. It was a small withdrawal, the kind measured in body language rather than words. But Lena noticed it the way she noticed everything. She did not say anything that night. She walked me to the door, said goodnight, and when I glanced back from the hallway I saw her expression for just a fraction of a second before she closed the door. It was the expression of someone who recognized what was beginning to happen and had decided not to fight it, because she had probably learned that fighting it only accelerated it. 8 days later, I got a text from Lena. It said, "I need to tell you something. Can you come over?" I drove over that evening. She opened the door before I knocked, which meant she had heard me coming up the stairs, which meant she had been listening. She was wearing jeans and a gray Henley, and she had clearly been sitting at the drafting table when I arrived because there was a coffee mug on it, with steam still rising. She told me to sit down. I sat in the chair near the window. She stayed standing, which was unusual for her. She said, "I know something changed, and I think I know why. And I think you deserve an honest explanation instead of just watching me pretend I don't know what happened." She told me that she had known me before I knew her, in any real sense, that she had been aware of me as someone Gwen talked about, long before we ever sat at a dinner table together, that when Gwen described the problems in our marriage, and she had in the way that people do with close friends, Lena had understood something she probably should have kept to herself, that the things Gwen described as flaws were not flaws she recognized as flaws. Gwen said I was too internal, too quiet, too self-sufficient. Lena had listened to those descriptions and thought privately that they sounded like someone she would rather have in her life than most of the louder, more demanding people she knew. She had done nothing with that. She was not built for betrayal, and she valued what she had with Gwen, even if it was a lopsided friendship in ways she had only recognized later. So she sat across dinner tables and kept her camera between herself and everything else, and did not say a word. After the divorce she had stayed out of it, completely. She did not reach out, she did not involve herself. She gave it 2 full years before she made the call. "I chose Denver on purpose," she said, "but the job is real. I want to be clear about that. The opportunity is real. I didn't manufacture an excuse. I just didn't turn it down because of where you lived." She looked at me when she said it, not apologetically, just directly, the way she did everything. "I should have told you that before you helped me move in," she said. "That wasn't fair." I told myself it didn't need to be said, but it did. I sat there for a while without speaking. I was going back through everything with a different lens. The tools she had laid out in the right order, the way she made coffee exactly the way I drank it, the questions about the highway documentary, the way she had solved the bracket problem on the drafting table in 4 seconds because she had been watching me work for years across a dinner table, making herself memorize things the way you memorize something you are terrified of losing. None of it had been casual. None of it had been accidental. "I need to ask you something," I said. "The texts, the ones about my schedule, my habits, Gwen told me, did not change." She looked at the floor for a moment, then back at me. "Yes," she said, "I asked about you. I told myself I was just keeping up with a friend's life, which was partly true, but not entirely. I'd be lying if I said otherwise." "Were you in love with me while we were married?" I asked. "While Gwen and I were married." She took her time. "I was aware of you in a way I didn't want to be. I kept it where it belonged." I believed her, not because I needed to, but because I had been watching her be honest for the last 6 weeks, and I recognized what it looked like on her face. We sat in that apartment in silence for a while. Outside, the city was doing what cities do in the early evening. Cars, voices, the distant hum of something large and ongoing. The sky over Denver had gone the deep orange and purple. It gets in October when the weather is changing. The kind of sky that looks temporary, like it knows it won't last, I said. "Why didn't you tell me before I found out some other way?" She said, "Because I didn't know how to tell you without it becoming the whole thing. I just wanted to see if there was something real first, before I made it into a conversation." That was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in a very long time. I did not say anything romantic. I did not make a speech. I stood up, picked up my jacket off the back of the chair and said, "I'm going to go home. I need to think. But I want you to know that nothing about what you just told me makes me want to leave." I saw something shift in her face. Not relief exactly. Something quieter than relief. I drove home and sat in the kitchen with a glass of water and thought about it for a long time. Here is what I kept coming back to. Gwen had told me I was too self-contained, too internal, emotionally unavailable, and for 18 months I had held on to that like a diagnosis, like a verdict, like something I had been convicted of and would carry. And then Lena, who had known me long enough to see the same Gwen had seen, had looked at those exact same qualities and thought, "That is someone I want to be around." Not despite the quiet. Because of it, I texted her that night. Just one line. "Breakfast tomorrow. I know a place that does good coffee, but you'd probably make better." She texted back in 12 minutes. "I'll bring the equipment. You drive." We did not have a formal conversation about what we were doing. We just started doing it. I drove to her building on Saturday mornings and she was always ready. Camera bag on the table, shoes already on, a thermos of pour-over she had made while I was parking. We drove out to the foothills some days, into the mountains on others, wherever there was something she wanted to photograph. I would sit on a rock or lean against the truck and watch her work, and she never performed it for me, never explained it, just moved through a landscape looking for the thing she had come to find. Some evening I cooked dinner at her place, because her kitchen window faced west and the light was better when the sun dropped behind the Rockies. She would sit at the drafting table and edit photographs on her laptop while I cooked, and occasionally she would say, "Come look at this one," and I would come look, and we would stand close enough that I could feel the warmth of her. And she would say what she was thinking about the image, and I would say what I was thinking, which was usually something structural and entirely unromantic, and she always laughed like that was exactly what she wanted. One evening I came by to help her hang a gallery wall she had been planning, a dozen photographs she had taken in Denver over the past 2 months, things she had shot on our drives and walks. I was measuring the wall and marking spots with a pencil, and she came to stand next to me to check the spacing. She looked at the arrangement for a moment, and then she said very quietly, "And not like who I am when you're here." I looked at her. She looked back, steady, calm, not performing. "I'm going to need to come back and finish this wall," I said. She smiled. "I know," she said. "You haven't done the top row yet. That's not what I meant." "I know," she said again. I hung the rest of the photographs. 6 months into whatever we were, the changes were small, but they were everywhere. A spare key appeared on my keychain without ceremony. A second set of hex keys materialized in her toolbox.
Yes.
That happened to be the brand I preferred. My coffee mug was in her cabinet, her pour-over equipment was in mine. Nobody announced any of this. Things moved into their right places on their own, the way they do when you stop trying to manage them. Gwen called one more time. Her voice was different, flatter, less pointed. She asked how I was doing, and I told her fine. Then she asked if Lena and I were together, and I said yes. There was a long pause. Then she said something I had not prepared for. "I always thought you just couldn't connect with people," she said. "I think maybe I just wasn't the right person." It was not an apology. It was something more complicated than that. An acknowledgement arrived at slowly and at some cost. I did not know whether she meant it fully or was still on some level rewriting her story into one she could live with more comfortably. Probably some of both. That is how people work. I said, "I hope you're doing well, Gwen," and I meant it. Not in the way you mean things when you want to sound gracious. Actually meant it. Because something had closed, some long-running internal account that I had kept open without realizing it. And what I felt when I hung up the phone was not victory and not vindication. It was just finished. That was 8 months ago. Now, Lena's drafting table is in my second bedroom because it gets better morning light than anything in her building. Her photographs are on my walls. My tools are in her closet. We have not had a formal conversation about any of it, and I do not think we need to. What I have learned, living inside this particular quiet life, is that there are people who experience silence as absence and people who experience it as space. Gwen needed it filled. I understood that about her finally, without resentment. But Lena had spent years moving through the world with a camera, looking for the thing inside the frame that most people walk past, and she had developed a fluency in finding what was there rather than cataloging what was missing. She found me the same way she found everything else worth photographing. She was patient enough to wait for the right light. I am standing in my kitchen now, watching her pour coffee from the ceramic pot she brought over 3 weeks ago, and I think about all the small things that had to fail or stall or go the wrong direction for this particular morning to exist. All the timing that had to be wrong before any of it could be right. I used to think the quiet was the problem, that it was keeping things at a distance. But it was not the quiet. It was just that I had not found someone yet who knew what to do inside it. Have you ever met someone who understood the parts of you that the people closest to you called flaws? What was that like? And if you had a chance to reach back out to someone you lost track of, would you take it, or would you leave it where it was? If this story stayed with you, hit the like button. If you want more, subscribe. I put out new stories every week, and if you have a story like this one, leave it in the comments. I read every single one.